Hello friends, this is Grease speaking. Today we're getting into tiers 5 and 6 of the Disturbing Manga Iceberg, and I can feel my soul chipping away bit by bit. You know the drill at this point, so let's just get right into it. This is the Disturbing Manga Iceberg, Part 3.
Tier 5. Children. Children is about a college kid who gets a summer job at a daycare in the mountains. It seems like a good gig, so he jumps on it. When he arrives, he finds that there are no adults, but instead a 14-year-old headmistress and some creepy-ass looking kids. Turns out that the young headmistress is a psycho who kills people and then feeds them to the children. She then forces the main character to get involved. It's pretty disturbing, mostly because the children assist in gathering and killing victims. But the cannibal element is definitely an unsettling cherry on top. Murcielago. Murcielago is a manga about a psychopath killer named Kuroko who, instead of being executed for her crimes, is used by the government to kill other psychopaths. It's cool having a total psychopath as a protagonist, and she kicks ass in often brutal ways. She also is constantly banging chicks throughout the series. I mean, the opening sequence of this manga is her scissoring a girl, which caught me off guard for sure. But yeah, she's basically got all the macho qualities of a badass action hero and the mentally disturbed tendencies of a villain. Speaking of the villains, the opponents she's faced with are pretty creative. The first bout we see her engaged in is with a roided up pro wrestler who takes it too far and kills his opponent in the ring before going on a rampage. ZOMBIEYA REIKO, or in English, REIKO the Zombie Shop, is about a high school necromancer, REIKO, who collects a fee for reanimating the dead, usually to understand how they died, making her a sort of undead detective. In the first volume, she mostly deals with a series of unconnected cases, like a mother who wants to know why her teenage daughter killed herself. Turns out that the daughter had been molested by her father, driving her to suicide. When she's brought back to life, she explains this before her zombie corpse rips her father's head off. It gets even more twisted because before REIKO leaves, the mother has one more request. She has REIKO reanimate the head of the dead husband simply so that she can torture him. You can see how dark this manga can get. It really seems to relish in it too. A lot of the chapter covers show REIKO in some typically offensive fashion, like wearing a Nazi uniform or using a crucified Jesus as a slingshot. Totally unrelated to the manga, but so weird, and gives you an idea that the author doesn't care about pushing boundaries, and this is displayed in some very gruesome acts of violence and gore throughout it. DOLLY Kill Kill. This is a bizarre one that kind of reminds me of Magic Girl Apocalypse. One day, giant dolls fall from the sky and begin wiping out all of humanity using a mix of their own various weapons and flying bugs that straight up cause people's bodies to dissolve. Well, high school student Aruma witnesses his friends and crush get demolished by this initial attack. Fast forward 1 year later, and Aruma has managed to survive living in the new apocalypse. He ends up meeting and joining forces with Yu, a teenage girl who wants to eradicate the dolls with her group of comrades. It's pretty wacky and off-putting at times, like the fact that one of the doll types is a pregnant doll, which is just weird. Versus Earth. Another weird apocalypse manga. Versus Earth is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, Earth sends these giant black pillars up to the surface that have eyeballs, and they just obliterate all the humans in sight, trying to exterminate all of humanity. There's a group of humans, however, who found a way to fight the pillars and destroy them. It's a really insane concept right from the get-go. Noah of the Blood Sea. I had no idea what to expect with a title like that. But basically, Noah and the Sea of Blood follows a group of people who mysteriously get free tickets to a cruise ship. They soon discover that most of the other guests got the tickets by chance as well. Soon, people begin disappearing and acting strange. We learn that there's a second group of high-class people that seem to be watching the guests, and there's a strange little girl named Noah. The manga does a great job of setting up the tone, with the opening scene showing a human being served on a platter at a table where the guests cut off her ears and eat them, as well as stick steel straws in her body, filling their glasses with blood. Okay, spoiler alert here, although this is revealed only a couple of chapters in, so it's not a major twist, and it's somewhat predictable. These are vampires on the ship, and the guests have all been invited in order to be picked off and feasted upon. The idea of being trapped on a ship with vampires is pretty scary because there's really nowhere to escape to. Eko Eko Azaraku. This manga follows a teenage girl who's actually a young witch practicing black magic. Her soul was sold to a demon as a baby, and now she dabbles in the dark arts. Usually each chapter follows the witch as she transfers to a new school and uses her black magic in order to enact a sixth sense of justice. In this way, she kind of acts as an anti-hero, using her magic against bad people, but often disregarding innocent people in the process. This is one of those mangas that's a little older, originally running in the 70s, but it's actually gotten both an animated adaptation and several film adaptations. Human Ranch. Human Ranch is as disturbing as it sounds. Basically, elves buy humans from the government to bring to their world where they raise them in a ranch like cattle to eat. There's an interesting ranking system within the ranch where you can avoid being sent to the chopping block by raising the ranks, but this usually requires selling out other humans in order to win points with the elves. The manga mostly follows a group of students who attempt to escape the ranch and withstand the horrors within, whether by the elves or other humans. The Red Snake. In the last video, we talked about Hideshi Hino, who stands out in the world of Japanese horror because of his unique art style and truly bleak sense of storytelling. I put him right up there with Junji Ito as far as being prolific in the genre. Well, The Red Snake is another one of Hino's works and might even be more bizarre than his other mangas we've covered. It follows a young boy who lives in a house in the woods. He tries to escape the house into the woods, but always ends up back at his front door. The house is strange and mysterious with long dark hallways and a large mirror. His grandpa warns him not to look into the mirror or the devil will snatch him and take him to a world worse than hell itself. So let's get into his family. His father keeps chickens, and when they don't lay eggs, he chops off their heads and then feeds them to the other chickens. Speaking of chickens, his grandma actually believes she's a chicken and lives in a giant nest in her room where she squawks at everyone, believing them to be stealing her eggs. It's so wacky, dude. His sister's obsessed with bugs and creepy crawlies, letting them crawl all over her. I mentioned the grandpa already, but I didn't mention that he has a massive lump hanging off of his face. And he has the boy's mother rub eggs on it and squeeze the bloody pus out of it. Yeah, sorry if you were eating. That's so gross, man. Well, the shit hits the fan when one day a red snake appears and starts sucking the blood from his sister. From this point on, basically everyone goes insane. The grandpa gets his leg cut off by the sister, the grandma hatches out of a huge egg as an actual giant chicken, the mom's face is burnt off by acidic pus that shoots out of the grandpa's new leg lump. Eventually the kid tries to escape the chaos and runs into the mirror world that turns into a literal hellscape with demonic, grotesque creatures trying to kill him. I'd recommend it, it's a good read. Paranoia Star. So, Paranoia Star is a manga by Suhiro Maruo, who is widely known for creating Shoujo Tsubaki, aka Midori, which is known as being one of the most shocking and disturbing mangas ever made. But we'll get to that later. Paranoia Star is one of the most batshit crazy things I've ever read, and honestly, more than anything on this iceberg so far, is the most I've ever asked myself, what the fuck am I reading? It's a collection of short stories, I guess you could call them all that seem to be themed around bizarre mental states. The first couple stories are the most cohesive. One follows a teenage boy who becomes obsessed with technology and suddenly his body is completely engulfed by the tape of a cassette, turning him into a strange abomination. It really reminds me of Tetsuo the Iron Man, not just in concept, but in the psychotic tone. The next story is a man who turns into an ant in a slow and graphic process. The last story seems to just showcase the horrors of World War II, loosely following a soldier and the horrible acts he participates in. There's one scene that just shows Japanese soldiers attacking a family by brutally raping the boy's mother in front of him before one of the soldiers picks the boy up by his feet and swings him into a wall while his head explodes. I know this all sounds completely chaotic, and I'm doing my best to find the actual story in this thing. It's basically a series of horrible and violent acts strung together as if by someone with a severe mental illness. The worst part about this, the art is actually stellar. I would say visually, this manga is very impressive. It almost feels like something you would see in some kind of modern art exhibit. It straight up assaults your visual sense, and I couldn't stop reading simply because the artwork and bizarre language kept going from one what the fuck to the next. It's certainly not for everybody. If you're a fan of horror manga and have a strong stomach, check it out if anything for the novelty, but I will warn you, it's extremely graphic and there are actually a lot of real life images in this manga. A lot of them are from vintage horror movies like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but there are some images that seem like they could be real pictures of dead bodies, so I'm not even sure if I can show this on YouTube. So yeah, if you want a real mindfuck, check out Paranoia Star. U12. Okay, the premise of U12 is that a group of underage girls is trapped in a prison full of pedophiles and they're slowly released, causing the girls to fight for survival and escape as pedos with varying degrees of mental illness and different abilities attempt to, well, you know. Let's just move on to Tier 6. Tier 6. Freak Island. Freak Island is often called an inspired mix between The Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A group of students become stranded on an island with a giant suited killer in a pig mask. As the story progresses, we learn that there's something darker going on with this island, which is full of severely deformed people. The pig mask killer belongs to a family of deformed cannibals. It does seem that the family is inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, especially the masked killer I mentioned earlier, who seems to be directly influenced by Leatherface. The family have some sort of regenerative powers that come from a demonic entity that they worship known as Santa Maria, who is essentially the satanic version of Saint Mary. It becomes more and more complicated after this, with more backstory given to the family and a lot of the survivor characters either being killed or transformed, or both. The Yakuza have ties to the island, and at one point the Vatican shows up. It's really insane. But that's what people seem to like about it. It's straight up bonkers. It's also extremely graphic with some really unique and uncomfortable kills and injuries. With brains, guts, dismemberment, all the good stuff. Mantis Woman. This is a sort of anthology manga featuring various horror stories. The first story is of course Mantis Woman, about a creepy ass woman who has blade arms like a praying mantis, which she uses to cut off people's heads. It's weirder than that actually. She collects the heads and then sews masks onto the faces and turns them into strange little doll creatures. Creepy. There's several more stories, including one about a small snake boy hybrid that kills people, a cult-like family, a gumball machine that's filled with body parts that are put together to form a killer creature, and my personal favorite is called Koala is Watching, which kind of seems like a joke, but a little koala bear doll starts trying to stalk and kill people. What's weird is that it's implied that some small human is simply inside of the doll, but the proportions don't even really make sense. Like, you just see a giant hand come out of its mouth or a foot come out the other way, but they kind of look like full-sized body parts. It's still pretty freaky when you realize there's something inside the koala though. DeadTube. DeadTube has a lot of twists and turns, especially in the first few chapters, but let me give you a general idea. DeadTube is a website where users upload videos of brutal acts and compete for views with the promise of vast amounts of money. The catch is that the person with the lowest amount of views will be held accountable for all the crimes committed in all of the videos on DeadTube, even if they did not commit them. The protagonist, Tomohiro, is introduced to the website by Mai, who ropes him into filming her as she lures a man into an abandoned factory and brutally murders him. DeadTube provides funding for the user's films, and the one with the highest views will be rewarded 10 million yen. Tomohiro slowly coming to the realization that the people around him are all playing this sick game is horrifying, and the fact that the contestants don't care at all about the heinous acts they commit or are committed on them is so disturbing. Needless to say, this one is highly graphic and only escalates as the series goes on and the contestants try to get more and more views. Yakudo Shoujo. Yakudo Shoujo, which translates to Burn Girl, is about a girl who's obsessed with death and fixates on eventually killing herself. She meets a boy who finds this fascinating, and they develop a very unhealthy and disturbing relationship where we learn more and more about the girl, including the fact that she kills and tortures small animals. She eventually decides that the duo will die together, so the manga essentially follows the twisted relationship, and honestly, it's not as bloody and gory as some of the other entries on here, but it might be the most depressing so far. Hell Baby. Speaking of depressing, let's talk about another Hideshi Hino classic, Hell Baby. Hell Baby starts with a woman giving birth to a set of twin girls. One, an ordinary beautiful baby girl, while the other is a horribly disfigured baby, and worse than that, she seems to have a taste for blood. After the father of the twins comes to this realization, he asks the doctor to keep quiet about the whole ordeal and to make up a story about losing one of the children during birth. In reality, they put the deformed child in a garbage bag and throw her in a dump where she eventually dies. However, her corpse is struck by lightning, bringing her back to life. From there, she spends years in the junkyard killing and eating nearby animals to survive. Eventually, a mysterious voice speaks to her and tells her to venture into the city and find her sister. I don't want to spoil what happens when she does find her, but I'll say this: as disturbing as this manga is, it actually really tugs on your heartstrings, and I was not expecting it to be so emotionally effective. I highly recommend it. Ogre Slayer. Ogre Slayer is about a young man who hunts ogres. The young man was born of an ogre's corpse, making him pure ogre blood. Though he was born like an ogre, he has the appearance of a human. Instead of being born with horns like traditional Japanese ogres, he was born with a sword. Besides the typical blood and gore you'd expect from a manga like this, there's an added disturbing element, which is that the demons can latch into a woman's womb like a parasite, which is how they reproduce. Saitama Chainsaw Shoujo. This manga is about Fumio, an ordinary high school student who loves reading manga and spending time with her boyfriend Takumi. However, her life takes a turn for the worse when she finds Takumi cheating on her with a new transfer student. This sends her into a depressed spiral, and finally she decides to use her family's chainsaw to kill Takumi and herself at school the next day. Pretty dark premise, I gotta say. Cambrian. Oh boy. Okay, so this one starts with Keiko, a scientist who's working at a research institute. She receives an unexpected call from a former colleague who attempted human cloning a year prior. After accepting his invitation to meet, Keiko is taken aback when she discovers that the professor has become a young man and his newfound youth is attributed to the Cambrian factor. As it turns out, the professor's goal is to replicate the Cambrian explosion, a remarkable evolutionary leap, using modern humanity, with the intention of becoming their creator and ruling over the world. The thing is, the way the Cambrian evolution is spread is by sex. So yeah, this one quickly devolves essentially into a tentacle hentai, but with added sci-fi body horror because once someone is infected, they transform in just really bizarre, brutal ways. It kind of reminds me of The Thing. Bloody Maiden. Bloody Maiden has a lot of similar qualities to some of the other mangas I've covered, mainly the idea that a group of students become trapped on an island and start getting killed off. This one does have a heavy emphasis on fan service though, as all the students are women. Cradle of Monsters. Cradle of Monsters follows a group of Japanese high school students who embark on a cruise ship named the Ocean's Cradle as part of a class trip. However, things take a dark turn when they suddenly capsize and end up floating upside down. The students soon discover that they're not alone on the ship as they come face to face with a crazed individual armed with a fire axe. As chaos and panic ensue, the teacher attempts to fight off the attacker but ends up getting bitten and infected by him. The attacker is revealed to be no ordinary human but a zombie, and soon other infected individuals begin to attack and kill the remaining passengers. Amid the mayhem, two groups of Japanese high school students manage to survive, one consisting of the main characters and the other group of violent juvenile delinquents. Additionally, a small group of American construction workers and a stewardess also survive the initial attack and must fight their way through the zombies to reach the bottom, now top, of the ship. Yakuza Girl. The manga Yakuza Girl takes place in modern-day Japan, where the protagonist, Fumihiro, enrolls at a prestigious academy to fulfill his grandmother's dying wish. Unbeknownst to Fumihiro, the school is not what it seems, as every student and teacher possesses supernatural powers and are divided into clans that brutally compete with each other by killing members of enemy clans. Fumihiro receives unexpected help from Akari, a girl whom he proposed to upon first sight. Ingoshima. Okay, this might be the most jarring so far, and I honestly regret reading some of it. It starts off as an island survival horror and quickly turns into some of the most fucked up smut to defile my eyeballs. So it starts off, a high school class is going on a boat trip or whatever, when of course the boat capsizes and they all wash up on an island. Turns out the island is full of natives who basically want to kill and have sex with everyone. So I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be some kind of Green Inferno or Cannibal Holocaust type thing, but it's so much worse. There's this gross old queen who has the male survivors all tied up nude and starts kissing them and grabbing their junk. Meanwhile, the ladies are all tied up, and after they take a selected few of them, the tribesmen just go to town. I pretty much noped out at this point because it's so hyper-sexualized, and considering its brutal gang rape, it just devolved into what appears to be a fetish manga. As far as I understand, it gets much, much worse, including huge loincloth-wearing tribe members who want to literally eat the men's asses, and people getting their wings chopped off and stuff. Like I said, I regret reading the parts of it that I did, and I think there's like hundreds of chapters of this manga, so for whatever reason it had legs and kept going.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Big shout out to my patrons, Naomi Romero, Soma, and Krusty the Crab. You guys are awesome. Sorry for taking so long to get this part out, but I'm hoping you're still enjoying it, and we have 4 more tiers to cover, so stay tuned. But as always, this is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.